Thank you for listening to By the Way, a podcast about contemporary art news where I present stories to my co-host Ando that he has most likely not heard before. My name is Eric. I'm an artist and art professional up here in Stockholm.
And my name is Ando, and I am an artist and a podcaster and a camel down here in Copenhagen.
All right, so today we're going to be talking about pussy, drugs, and Jeff Koons.
Oh, man. All right,
so let's get started.
Good. Man, you always hit, man, those, yeah. You have some good titles.
You know, I work on these. I
can tell. You're really into puns, too, like E40.
E40?
He's a rapper from the Bay Area who loves puns.
Okay. So, last week, I kind of referenced that there was a lull over the holidays with art news, and now it's starting to pick up again. So, I'm going to actually bring up a couple of quick stories today. And we'll just see what you respond to and what's kind of the most interesting thing.
All right, and I have a bonus, too, because I actually have one from this morning, which you may or may not have seen, which is really fast. But we'll finish with that one.
Okay, I think I know which one, but
Probably. There's only one, I think.
Okay, fair enough. So, no, I wanted to kind of quickly just throw out one that I found very interesting, that the two members of Pussy Riot, that's where the title Pussy, Drugs, and Jeff Koons comes from.
Indeed.
Yeah. So I didn't know this, that Pussy Riot, two of the members from Pussy Riot are actually here in Sweden, and they're seeking asylum.
Oh, I may have heard that, but I don't remember.
Okay. Yeah. So, the Pussy Riot, for just anybody who doesn't know, they're this performance art group, does a lot of music type of performances, got in a whole bunch of trouble with in Moscow for mocking Putin in 2012 and 2014. They then also protested under the Olympic banner in Sochi. They were attacked, beat up, pepper sprayed by security guards, and at that point they more or less, two of the members fled from Russia and came to Sweden, and they've been living about 2 hours from Stockholm in a refugee camp.
Wow.
And with their son as well.
There's three of them in all, right? Three members?
I think it's three like core members, but I think it's actually a little bit more like a collective as well. But yeah, one thing that I found super interesting is they're massive artists internationally with a name. I had no clue they were just, down the road from me.
I wonder if they're trying to keep that shit on the down low, Although I guess if the Russian state wants to find you, they'll fucking find you.
Yeah, this has been covered in a whole bunch of that they're here in quite a few papers now that I saw that. But one thing I found very interesting, so as they seek asylum here, they can't travel abroad from Sweden. And in this last year, they've had an exhibition in Milan and in London that they actually couldn't go to the openings to.
Right, couldn't leave the country.
Yeah, which I actually thought was a little bizarro, meaning that they are still EU countries.
Well, that's typical. I mean, because those asylum laws are essentially made with a certain amount of xenophobia and racism in mind. At least that's the case here in Denmark. And they really want people to not be all over the place. They want them to stay put, even though it can take huge amounts of time to process these applications and do the interviews and all that sort of stuff.
Yeah.
So yeah, I don't think I mean, here in Denmark, as far as I understand, a lot of people can't even work.
Well, yeah, but that's just, even if they were legally there as immigrants or foreigners, that's going to be tough for them anyways.
Yeah.
That's the Danish system for you. No, But I thought, meaning they're pinned down essentially in some small town in Sweden that,
right.
Yeah,
and I guess
should get them on the podcast.
Yeah, do that.
They have nothing better to do.
I feel like the Swedes are also like, well, everyone gets treated equally, so no special treatment for them just because they're famous.
Yeah,
at least not visibly.
I don't know if Zlatan, the footballer,
Mm.
in a refugee camp, I'm pretty sure they'd go ahead and let him walk around, shirtless.
Soccer, soccer is on a whole different, level than the rest of the world.
Fair enough. Yeah. So no, that's just one quick story I wanted to throw out there that I found, just kind of interesting.
Mm-hmm.
So far, we haven't talked too much about any photographers. Do you know of any photographers in the news right now?
Let me think.
All right. Well,
I feel like I should have the answer to this, but I don't.
That's why I threw it that way. I thought you might. Do you
Joke
know
on it?
the photographer Nan Goldin?
Oh yes. Oh God, of course. Yes, I do.
Yeah. All right. Go ahead. Throw it.
I read
fill the listeners in.
I read the headlines. She's after the Sackler family.
Yes.
Which is a big story. And this is because I read the New Yorker. I also know about the Sackler family. They are the family who have, I guess, majority ownership in Purdue Pharma, which produces OxyContin, which under a lot of people's different opinions is one of the leading causes of the opioid crisis in the U.S. And it's killing a lot of people.
Yeah.
And she also was addicted to OxyContin. And then now is, because they are huge philanthropists in the art world. And everyone just turns a blind eye to the fact that they are drug manufacturers.
Yeah. There you go. That's
They make opiates. They make heroin, heroin pills.
That's pretty much the story. For our European listeners that don't know what OxyContin is, it's actually called oxycodone. That's like the...
right.
What you might have it labeled at your pharmacy or apothec, just because OxyContin's the American branded name of it.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, so yeah, you pretty much were right on it. She is a photographer. Do you know much of her work? I mean, I think she's amazing, but
I do. She is really, really amazing. She made a book called The Ballad of Sexual Dependency, which is a classic book. I mean, anyone who doesn't know her, I assume our listeners do, but anyone who doesn't, just fucking get on Google and do that, because it's really, really good work. It's very warm. It's very personal.
Well, I mean, I knew her, or I know of her, but I didn't know like the themes that she, became most famous for. And a lot of her stuff is a little bit about the seedier sides of life. Mm-hmm. And so...
marginalized groups, etc.
Yeah, and she really rose to fame in the late 70s and 80s. And
80s, I'd say, yeah.
Yeah, and then with this drug addiction that she developed in recent years, she kind of fell off the map when it came to production. And she wrote that she got addicted in a very similar way that very many artists or just people in general do. She had a surgery and was prescribed 3 pills a day, which I think was something like 45 milligrams. She was unable to handle it. It upset her stomach. And, so she actually even took a reduced level of that. And very quickly she increased to 18 pills a day, which is something like, 450 milligrams. So in a very short time, she built up a tolerance as well as an addiction to it.
Right.
And then very easily transitioned due to money and access and doctors realizing, okay, you're an addict. We aren't going to prescribe this because that's unethical at that point. It wasn't beforehand. To fentanyl, which is another drug that a lot of street dealers are lacing it with to thin it, increase the volume and its lethal action or lethal dosage. But she actually overdosed as well. Obviously didn't die.
I didn't hear that.
Yeah, so she had like a 3 or 4 year period where she was just in the shits.
Gonzo.
Yeah, so she's been now clean for about a year and kind of discovered the Sackler family like you talked about, and that they're behind Purdue Pharma and major donors in the art world.
Yeah, and there's a whole, like I said before, there's a really good New Yorker article about this. It's quite long. It's from a couple months ago. Mm-hmm. I can't remember the name at this moment, but you can probably find it if you look. But the Sackler family is huge. There's not very many of them who are involved directly with Purdue Pharma.
I think it's like three of them, really.
Yeah, but they've really, like, even the ones not involved who are beneficiaries of this money are just kind of like, hey, man, that's not my problem, man. Like, that's not what I do, man.
But the reason that this came back up in the news, because I did see that there's been little blurbs about it in the, like you said, 2 months ago or so in the New York Times, is that Nan has finally come out and said what she wants to do and a strategy to kind of take on Purdue Pharma. And so she actually set up, and it was funny, in an interview or an article interview that I read, it almost seemed as if she had no clue what social media was, what the internet was. She's like, I discovered, Twitter and Facebook and something called change.org. And so she actually started a change.org petition. Right. And on there, she wrote something that was really, really interesting. And I'll just read this really quick bit from her change.org because I think it sums it up well and it's pretty powerful. So this is what she wrote. I survived the opioid crisis. I narrowly escaped. I went from the darkness and ran full speed into the world. I was isolated, but I realized I wasn't alone. When I got out of treatment, I became absorbed in reports of addicts dropping dead from my drug, Oxycontin. I learned that the Sackler family, whose name I knew from museums and galleries, were responsible for the epidemic. The family formulated, marketed, and distributed Oxycontin. I've decided to make the private public by calling them to task. Yes. So essentially, she's wanting to expose their museum, gallery, philanthropic side of everything.
Right, which is going to put a lot of museums or cash-starving institutions in a hard spot because the Sacklers donate millions.
Yes, they have a section of the Met that they more like sponsor. Their name or their plaque is there. There's one.
We're talking hundreds of millions, I believe.
Oh, absolutely. There's 3 or 4 major museums in New York with a wing or a room or something named after them. But she's reaching out to other artists that have this relationship to, Oxycontin, opioid, people that might have passed, to help put pressure on the directors, the boards of institutions to not accept their money, their donations, their charitable donations. And this is also the same drug combination, you could say, that Prince died from a few years ago, as well as what Tom Petty overdosed on. So I think she'll probably be reaching out to the music world as well, even though they're not tied to the music industry as much, and to get more of the creative arts to put pressure on Purdue Pharma.
Well, it seems like America has not really had a true reckoning with the opioid crisis yet. There's been a fair amount of hysterical news, but very little actual soul-searching or reckoning about it. And maybe, just maybe, this could be a case in which they do so.
Yeah, I mean, this is also one of these cases where I don't know how well art and artists can affect public policy. I think a lot of people in the arts assume we're more powerful, we're more important, and more people are listening to us than maybe are. But
if you can create enough of a spectacle, people love Nan Goldin. She's famous enough that she has a voice in that sense. And if you can whip up enough of a story that the media will carry it, you may be able to, and if you can thread Prince to Nan Goldin to Tom Petty, then all of a sudden you have a much larger audience.
Tie it to the Guggenheim and, that they're putting pressure on and shows are getting canceled or, yeah.
This is relevant news in that sense. And again, I think the opiate crisis is a point of interest for a lot of people.
Yeah. So that's where this is kind of an interesting story, because this is one that, that crosses over a lot of these.
Right. This is real life shit. This isn't just art.
Yeah. I don't know. I think it's awesome that she's doing it, and she's definitely a figure that could bring media attention to it, and she's a powerful enough person based on her, history to hopefully gather enough artists to put pressure on these institutions The institutions, I don't think, have really done anything wrong. But they hopefully will then put pressure on the Sackler family and Purdue Farms, and yeah.
Who knows? I mean, because the problem is, again, due to the nature of our system and the way corporations work and such, most of the Sacklers really do have nothing to do with it. They're just rich-ass motherfuckers. And they might like art. And, of course, where does their responsibility lay? But it quickly becomes really hairy if you're born into a family which is tied to unethical practices, but you're just some person who, isn't really related to that, has no personal control over it even.
Well, Nan, in an article also, kind of referenced that, I think her name is Elizabeth Sackler. It was one of the Sacklers that her father was one of the brothers. So her uncles are the ones that are really behind OxyContin's explosion in the 90s. Her father isn't involved in the company, but she herself is a beneficiary of the finances of the company because it was like her grandfather that started it. And Nan said that's awesome that she's, supporting me and agrees essentially with what she stands for, but there's still a little bit of blood on her hands because she's receiving this money through, some funds that are paying her out monthly or whatever. And if she's not using that money for good, setting up, like a rehab centers or essentially redistributing that, maybe what Nan would maybe say is blood money to a good cause. And even if she's just taken 10% for herself, she would maybe think that's too much. Then 100% should go to actually fighting this because
renounce that money all in all.
Yeah, which would be incredibly tough to do. I mean, I don't know if I could do it.
I have a hard time imagining how I would behave. I mean, it's easy to be like, yeah, dude, you know what I would do, but like, I don't know. It's incredibly complicated situation. And I mean, one thing is also they are donating money to the arts, which in most contexts we think is a really ethical, good thing to do. I'm all for donating money to the arts. So it's complicated when it becomes like, well, where did this money come from? And what's the story of this money? And who did you have to step on whose blood was this money made?
Yeah.
You know? But like, if you start looking into multimillionaires and the money they donate, I'm pretty sure the Sacklers aren't the only ones who have unethically sourced money.
No, in Chicago, actually one of the largest collection families is the Pritzkers. And they are one of the leading arms manufacturing families in the world. And that's where a majority of their money comes from, is from, arms development, selling, and distributing of those. And the Pritzkers are incredibly powerful. There's a wing of the Art Institute in Chicago named after them. And I think it's Penny Pritzker. She is actually now become an artist. So
good for her.
And she's uber wealthy, obviously. That she did I think it was her MFA at the Art Institute. And for her senior thesis exhibition, because she obviously was struggling like all the other people in the program, she decided that she wanted to jump in a helicopter and do aerial drawings in Africa, I think it was. So that's the kind of ridiculous amount of money we're talking about with these type of families.
I don't know how true this is, but I'm pretty sure people who make enough money to give away hundreds and millions of it, often that money comes from ethically dubious situations.
Hell, and half of my money, and I'm poor, comes from ethically dubious situations.
What'd you do? No, I mean, I really do think that as long as the system's built up in this manner, it's going to be hard to find money, well-earned money, because the system is not built out on, just like art is so expensive for the most part, most average people can't afford it. So, until you have millions and millions of middle-class families buying original artworks, they're not going to have any financial say in the doings and the business of the art world.
No, that's where the artist can, put some pressure on, these institutions.
A little bit, but it's a closed. It's the largest. I just read this.
Unregulated market in the world.
Yeah, it's the largest unregulated market in the world.
Yeah,
which is a great place to hide money, to whitewash money, all sorts of stuff.
Lots of money laundering.
Yeah.
But we talked about the Guggenheim. Is that where your story was? Then you should throw this story.
All right. This was one of the rare situations where an art institution could deliver a really big burn when the White House asked if they could borrow a Van Gogh painting. And the Guggenheim said, no, you cannot. But if you would like to, you can instead have a long-term loan of Maurizio Cattelan's all-gold toilet. Would you like that?
And the answer was?
Did they answer?
No comment. But no, I think that's hilarious. They wanted, so for the listeners, it's a Van Gogh painting called Landscape with Snow. And any sitting president has the right to request art from any of the American institutions that are owned by the government. In this case, the Smithsonian. Yeah, so there's articles. Well, no. So they, they can request things, from like the Smithsonian and such like that. They asked to, loan this painting for the White House's private residence, the Van Gogh painting. And that's where, the director of the Guggenheim offered the good old golden toilet, which was actually installed in the museum up until recently. And then they deinstalled it, and they don't know what they're going to do with it. I think it works great for Trump's ass.
I think it works great for any ass. It's a great piece of artwork. The context fits. The artist fits. Maurizio Cattelan is amazing.
Oh, he's hilarious. I love that guy.
I just saw his fuck finger in Milan.
I saw Christmas. If you look at, I think it's on the Undergang's Facebook as well as on your Instagram.
It's on the Cultural Bandwidth Instagram and Facebook for Undergang. But the even better part about that story is it's in front of the stock exchange in Milan. And it was put up for Art Week. And it was supposed to just be there for a week. So it's this huge plinth of a big fuck you finger in front of the stock exchange, the Milan Stock Exchange. And then it was supposed to come down after a week, and people just protested. They were like, this is amazing. This needs to stay here. So it got, basically people, I think, even were blocking trucks that were supposed to come and remove it.
That's awesome.
So now there's a huge fuck you outside the stock exchange. All right, well, do we have time for Jeff Koons? You teased that earlier. Yeah,
we'll go ahead and segue from a big fuck you to another big fuck you, as we have Jeff Koons, who recently decided he was going to donate a work to the city of Paris and memorial to for the victims of the Charlie Hebdo and the Bataclan terrorist attacks in 2015 and 16. Have you read anything about this or heard anything about it?
I've heard about the attacks, but I did not hear about Jeff Koons.
Yeah, so he donated this, and this is where it's kind of funny because you say donated, and well, he didn't actually donate the work. He donated the concept, so the idea, to the city. And
the drawings.
I don't even know if he made it that far, but probably. I think so. And if they accepted it, which they did, they needed to fund, however, if it was bring up finding the money in taxes or private funding or whatever, they needed to produce the sculpture and also the installation of it. So that has already gone, the production's already started. It's getting built in somewhere in Germany. And the estimated cost to complete this idea of Jeff Koons, which he was so graciously offered his ideas to the French public in honor of these fallen victims of terrorist crime.
Do I detect the note of sarcasm?
Oh, no, I love Koons. He's such a genuine individual. There's nothing behind this. It's self-promotion. It's about $4.3 million. I think about 3.5 million euros.
Hey, why doesn't the Sackler family pay for that?
I don't know if they're...
Since we're on unethical behavior, just fucking go whole hog.
Yeah, why not, right? Well, if this makes it any better, this is definitely maybe where the Sacklers could even make it better, and fund it, maybe raise it up. You'll hear why. So Koons, once it presented in a specific sort of spot in the city, a lot of people would think, okay, this should go in the area somewhat close to where those two events occurred. I looked them up on Google Maps because I didn't exactly know where they were, and they're less than a kilometer apart. And I would say 4 or 5 kilometers from Notre Dame and such in the city, but not in a highly tourist area. Koons, he wants it outside the Place de Tokyo, which is in one of the more tourist areas. It's also
right across from the Eiffel Tower.
Yep. And a couple other things, So if you look at Google Maps, you can just see, okay, this goes right along the river, right over to Notre Dame, down to the Pantheon. Then you got the Eiffel Tower, you have the Louvre, all the biggest sites that a person wanting to do Paris in 2 days, 3 days, they're going to stumble
right in
across
front of
this.
A very venerable art institution where a lot of art going public goes.
Yeah, and
you don't say.
Yeah, so who would have thought he would have had something, self-promotion, trying to be such a nice, kind man and donating this work in memory of these
so strange
victims of a terrorist attack. But then where they want to place it, it's a giant sculpture. It's like 40-something feet tall, a couple tons, is also over the top of an exhibition space of the Palace de Tokyo. So there's a risk, even before installing it, that they are going to need to close that section and reinforce the exhibition space below. And so because of all of this, and also the work just sucks, we haven't even got to that. It's a big cheesy hand with balloon tulips in it to reference or make a reference to the Statue of Liberty's hand, because the French gave the Statue of Liberty to the U.S. This would be the U.S.'s gesture back to Paris or to France.
Man, that's deep.
Oh, very deep. This just sounds like advertising, This sounds like an absolute ad.
Yeah, total diesel jeans ad.
Oh, that's even worse. Yeah, so there's a whole bunch of people in the French art community that have come out and are signing a petition. Even the foreign minister of cultural affairs that's on it, that's like, no. We can build. You guys can build it because it's actually being built with private funds, but it can't go there, and it has to go somewhere else. So it's not this self-promotion of, Jeff Koons.
Dude, that guy is savvy. That's all I can say. Jeff Koons is savvy because no matter what, it's headlines once again.
Yeah.
With his name on it. He's so talented at that.
Yeah.
I don't know what to say about that guy anymore. I like that. The theme from today seems to be there's a lot of people resisting certain forces. And I do like that, These are 3 different artists. Well, these are 2 artist groups who are resisting evil, and then 1 artist who is being evil and being resisted.
Yeah, he's an art terrorist.
That's the end of that's the show for today.
All right.
Well, thanks for listening, everybody, to another episode, number 8, I do believe.
Yes.
By the way, we would like to ask you a favor. If you could go on iTunes or wherever you listen to podcasts and write a little review. It's the currency of podcasts. It'll help people find us. And then we'd also like to ask you to check out our website. It's at culturalbandwidth.com, and there you'll also find links to all sorts of social media for the various programs. My show's on there, the Undergang Armchair. There's more stuff coming soon. So be sure to check that out. Tell your neighbor, enemies, and lovers. And be sure to check out Eric is running the Facebook page for By the Way, and he's doing a bang-up job over there. Lots of news, tidbits, interesting stuff. So he's way, way better at keeping that updated than I am online. But check it all out. You can all find it on culturalbandwidth.com. Thanks, buddy.
All right. Talk to you in about 2 weeks.
Sounds good.
All right. Bye.